fourth episode begins with Julia spilling the morning milk. She tells Davina that there's no use crying over spilled milk, but Davina's worried about the fairy folk. She fears Julia has angered them. To top it all off, Lord Lovat is returning home from his month-long visit to Edinburgh. Then we flash back, or forward, to around the time Julia was pregnant with Claire. She's in her apartment. She picks up her copy of Peter Pan and Wendy before asking Henry how he feels about the name Peter if they have a boy. Then, Henry reveals he's going to chat with his former boss about getting his job back at the solicitor's firm. Before he departs, Julia feels a kick. She places Henry's hand on her stomach. Julia asks Henry if he will be disappointed if they have a girl instead. Henry reassures her that he will love their child regardless. In 1713, Lovat returns to Castle Leathers from Edinburgh. Julia sits on her bed with what looks like poisoned sumac. She rubs it all over her chest, neck, and arms. Later, Unahai informs Henry at the brothel that she's found Julia. However, we see it's not Julia, but a brunette woman, Seema, who works there. Seema reveals Una has instructed her to do whatever Henry wants. Henry urges her to put her clothes back on. He sits on her bed and admits he was worried he would discover Julia here. Seema has a more half-glass-full approach. At least she's here in the brothel and not out in the cold. Meanwhile, Brian gives Lovat a letter from the Grants. Well, Henry wrote it as their representative. Lovat reads part of it aloud to Brian, the part that addresses Lovat's concern regarding Ellen's image. Henry writes that Clan Mackenzie's interests do not align with Clan Grant's. They would need sufficient evidence to prove Ellen is unworthy of Malcolm's hand. Lovat doesn't buy it, though. He believes there's a reason she's been unwed for so long. Julia emerges with Lovat's lamb stew. He notices a rash on her neck and chest. Julia admits she gets it all over her body on occasion. Lovat's just grateful it isn't contagious. Julia reveals there's a simple remedy, but she would need to visit the apothecary. Lovat urges Balak to escort Julia to Bowley. Brian quickly volunteers to accompany her instead. Next, at Castle Leoch, Colum tells Ellen that Malcolm has requested she attend a Beltane celebration near Inverness in 2 months. The catch? She must go with him as his betrothed. Ellen puts her foot down. She insists they no longer need the Grants on their side, since they served their purpose, to help Colum secure the lairdship. Colum refuses to renege on his word, though. Ellen pivots, asserting that if she marries Malcolm, she will be devoted to Clan Grant, body and soul. She can't aid her former family. Ellen runs into Dougal in the corridor, who insists he would rather she marry Marcus McGrannock. Dougal realizes Ellen is trying to drive a wedge between him and Colum. He declares that they're a united front now. Later, Isaac Grant chats with Henry about his search for Julia. Isaac hopes Henry can perform his duties sufficiently for Clan Grant, and that this search won't take precedence. Quarter day is fast approaching, and Henry must collect rent money from Isaac's tenants. Isaac tells Henry he must ask for a small increase in their usual pay. Archbug will accompany him. Elsewhere, Brian and Julia are en route to the apothecary. Brian asks Julia about her condition. How often does she get it? What causes it? Is it really all over her body? Julia puts the kibosh on this line of questioning. After this, we see Henry address the tenants who live on Grant land as they prepare to pay rent. He informs the first tenant about the rent increase. He reluctantly drops an extra shilling. Then, a woman whose husband passed away claims she doesn't have enough to pay rent. She has 4 children to feed, along with another on the way. However, she offers Henry some fresh honey, hoping this will appease Isaac. Henry accepts it, but informs her she must eventually pay what she owes. This angers the man before her. Another man asks about the former Bladier. Henry informs him that said Bladier is no longer in the service of Clan Grant. Suddenly, the man punches Henry. Henry fights back. He beats the snot out of the man. Eventually, the fighting ceases. Henry snaps out of it, realizing how much damage he inflicted on the tenant. Why didn't Arch stop him? Arch believed Henry was shaking the money out of the man. Arch reminds Henry that he must get Isaac every shilling he's owed, regardless of the sob stories these people tell him. We flash back to Henry's time in the war. He sits with a private. The young soldier claims he's so nervous he needs a cigarette. Henry tries to dissuade him from smoking, asserting they will hear them. As an explosion rings out, Julia turns on the light. Henry is in at the foot of their bed screaming. He was having a PTSD-fueled nightmare. Julia embraces Henry and sings softly to him to assuage his anxiety. Julia gives him her necklace before praying St. Anthony will protect him. In the present, or the past, Arch wakes up Henry, asking him what's wrong with him. Henry has been screaming bloody murder and muttering about Julia in his sleep. Henry urges Arch not to worry about it. Elsewhere, Julia asks Brian why he hasn't left Castle Leathers. He's a good-looking lad. Brian admits his being a bastard doesn't exactly entice the lassies. She recites a quote she read once that stuck with her. Brian asks Julia if she can read, to which she responds, "A little." In the 20th century, Henry reads the newspaper about the National Lottery returning to raise funds during the war. Julia admits she would pay for a ticket. Henry is unsure whether the money will go to those who need it, probably to purchase more munitions to keep the fighting going in perpetuity. Julia grabs his hand, telling him that people need something to believe in. Hope keeps us going. So, Henry tells the Grant tenants that they can pay what they can for their rent. To supplement, he's creating a lottery. The tenants can purchase as many tickets as they want to enter the lottery with the additional money contributed to their rent. Henry will place the tickets in Arch's hat. He'll draw the winner. The winner won't have to pay rent for a year living for free on Clan Grant lands. Arch vehemently protests this. Isaac won't be happy. Henry fires back that those who can afford to pay extra will balance it out. They'll have the funds. Elsewhere, Brian and Julia wind up near Castle Leoch. Brian remarks that Julia's ailment seems to have healed on its own. He knows she feigned her condition. He asks Julia to help him out by sneaking into Leoch to deliver a message to Ellen. Brian wants to see his beloved. So, Julia and Brian strike a deal. If Julia does this, Brian will help her escape Leathers. She must reunite with her beloved. Julia marches into Leoch via the servants' entrance. Julia meets Mrs. Fitz, who earlier Brian explains is Murtaugh's aunt and Ellen's maid. She concocts an excuse for being there, stating that the housekeeper at Leathers fell ill. Julia knows plants well, so she left to find some. However, she lost her way. Mrs. Fitz allows Julia to stay for a bit to recover her strength. Despite working for warring clans, Mrs. Fitz believes the servants must stick together. Then, Mrs. Fitz informs Julia that Ellen has been heartsick lately and refuses to leave her chambers. She knocks on Ellen's door with food, but Ellen insists she's not hungry. After Mrs. Fitz leaves, Julia knocks on Ellen's door. "I'm the bridge," she says, proving Brian sent her. Claire's mom and Jamie's mom finally meet. Julia tells Ellen that Brian is outside and wants to see her. She shakes her head, claiming she can't go. If Colum or Dougal learn about a Fraser on Mackenzie land, they will hunt him down. The conversation pivots to Beltane. Julia learns about Ellen attending with Malcolm at the celebration near Inverness. She realizes the Standing Stones, Craigna Dunn, are there. Perhaps she will find Henry there. After this, Julia persuades Ellen to sneak out with her to meet Brian. Julia stands at a distance as Brian and Ellen reunite. Brian asks Ellen if she wants to marry Malcolm. Ellen insists her feelings for Brian haven't changed. Brian declares his love for her. However, someone is lurking nearby, so Brian and Julia had better hightail it out of there. Ellen runs into Dougal, who's patrolling the area. Ellen makes up an excuse for being outside so late. She couldn't sleep and wanted to pray in Mother Nature. The following day, Henry continues on with the lottery, much to Arch's irritation. On the way back to Leathers, Brian tells Julia he's grateful he will get to see Ellen at Beltane. Julia informs him that Ellen will be there with Malcolm. Brian will need someone to distract Malcolm so he can spend time with Ellen. She volunteers to attend the celebration with him. However, in return for helping Brian, Julia would like Brian's assistance. She reveals that she and Henry were separated near Inverness. She hopes Brian can help her find him. Meanwhile, Ellen presents Colum with a list of guests for her and Malcolm's impending nuptials. She mends fences with Colum, insisting nothing is worth the chasm between them. At the same time, Isaac isn't super pleased that Henry didn't follow his instructions. Henry presents a big old bag full of money, more than what is needed. It includes the increase and is enough to cover rents for the quarter. But Isaac doesn't like the idea of anyone foregoing rent for a whole year. No thanks to Henry's lottery. Henry tells Isaac that he can deduct the lottery winner's rent from his earnings to offset the cost. Isaac allows his defiance this time, but next time he won't be so kind. After Henry leaves, Arch asks Isaac if he wants him to kill their new Bladier. Isaac claims he doesn't, but to watch Henry closely. In the 20th century, Henry apologizes to Julia for his panic attack the night before. He tearfully states that something in him is broken. Julia reassures Henry that he's not broken. She fell in love with the man who wrote her those beautiful letters. During their conversation, Henry has an idea for a girl's name, Claire. It's French for clear and bright. Then, in the 18th century, Henry returns to the brothel for some time with Seema. He tells her that he's been searching for Julia for months now. Seema tries to initiate intimacy, but Henry asks her if they can just lie in bed together for a spell. At Lioch, Lovat ushers Julia into his chambers. He wants only one thing, however, Julia urges him to be careful with her. She's with child, his child, or so he thinks. Lovat is over the moon. Davina pops up and Lovat tells her the good news. Davina congratulates them. Julia must do what she can to protect herself and her baby.